And we're back, and you have no idea how great that feels for me to say, but there's been a lot going on in Oregon, and as you know, I also work in news, so when things come up, I have to go do non-nerd news stuff. The state was on fire, there was smoke everywhere. Boy, my lungs did not enjoy that, but people lost their homes, some people lost their lives. It was very serious, and they're still trying to rebuild, and so my heart really goes out to them. We had political rallies and protests and all sorts of stuff going on. So, but I'm back and I'm really excited to be here and have an amazing interview for you guys this week. You should be so excited to watch it. Lucy Bellwood, she is a local Portland comic book artist and author, but I did not find her through her comics actually. I found her through this amazing project she has going on right now called The Right Number, which is a phone number that you can call and it has a rotating prompt and you can answer it. And I did it a few weeks ago and it was so cathartic. So, without further ado, let's talk catharsis. Lucy Bellwood is great. You may know her from her comic 100 Demons Dialogues, which is so cool and so relatable, but she has another amazing project going on called, again, The Right Number. It's a number that you call and you can leave up to 3 minutes worth of a message and you answer a prompt. And like I said, I did it a few weeks ago and it was so cathartic to just say something and know that somebody was gonna hold that secret, right? There's something really sort of, I don't know, giddy about giving somebody a secret, right? And we sort of talked about that, but Lucy just has so much advice for people starting in comics, and I think there's so much to learn from her experience and what she's done and about being vulnerable, and it was truly like an amazing interview. I'm bummed it took me so long to get up, but please, I hope you enjoy it. She's great. So I'm just gonna shut up now.
Okay, and I asked this of everybody. Could you say and spell your first and last name for me?
Absolutely. My name is Lucy Bellwood. That's Lucybellwood.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucy. And you are an adventure cartoonist based in Portland, Oregon. I had never heard of adventure cartooning until I moved to Portland. So could you tell the fine people of the channel what exactly that is and why you label yourself that?
Yeah, I didn't always call myself an adventure cartoonist. It was, I think, a term that I hit on maybe 3 years ago that described the thing that I seemed to have stumbled into doing, which was going out into the world and doing very unsedentary cartoonisty things, but then either while I was out there or when I came back making comics about those things. And I'm delighted to report that there were many other people who were also adventure cartoonisting, even if we didn't know the term for it was such. And there's something about like hitting on the right name for a thing that can really rally people around each other. So I'm delighted to report that now there are backpacking adventure cartoonists and like marine science adventure cartoonists and all these different people who are doing, some intersection of like comics and sort of adjacent to comics journalism, I suppose. A lot of the time the work is autobiographical in some way, but it's definitely got a bit of a flavor of like, so let's say you're not an inside cat, but you still want to make comics, which is typically a very inside cat kind of pastime. I feel like it situates itself in that space.
Yeah, I think that that's incredible because I do think that people think of comics as because it can be this very sedentary and lonely experience of sitting in a room somewhere with a dim light, scribbling away like a little goblin.
Yeah, sure.
And that's very like journalism, court documents, like nobody talk to me. But it certainly can be something, whatever you make it. And I think that's really cool. And there are a lot of adventure cartoonists here in Portland. I was very pleased to find as I started poking around for the channel. And I have met other adventure cartoonists who have been part of Helioscope, and you were as well, right? Which is like an artist collective here in Portland. How was that?
Yeah. A totally life-changing space to be in. I didn't move to Portland because of Helioscope, which at the time was called Periscope Studio. But a bunch of artists who I really admired when I was coming up in the scene all became members in the, like late 2000s, maybe like pre 2010. And 2010 was kind of when I started drawing my own comics. That was when I thought, okay, I'm about to graduate college. I graduated in 2012. Does that still sound okay? Good. All right, cool. And I really, really, really wanted to be a part of the mentorship program that the studio ran so that I could get the opportunity to learn from those folks. And in 2012, I got that chance in October and joined originally as a sort of intern mentee And then was there for a few months and eventually became a sort of trial member and then an actual member. And since then have started running the mentorship program, which has been a really great opportunity to foster a bunch of new cartoonists coming up into the industry and sort of pay that experience forward. But yeah, we're the largest collective of freelance cartoonists in North America, I think. There's 28 maybe members. We vacillate a lot. New people come and go all the time, but it is a really lovely community of folks really focused on bettering their craft. And there's a wide range of folks in attendance, which I really appreciate. So you've got everybody from like big to mainstream superhero comics folks all the way down to like indie DIY mini comics people. And that range is just like, it really makes the program, especially for mentorship purposes, a very strong one because people can kind of get the whole range, and they can learn from each other, which I think is the beauty of comics as a medium, is that it can encompass all of those things. And there's no single right way to do all of it. And I think the folks who have come through the program, many of whom go on to become members, just like I did, and many people before me, that it affords the opportunity to really carve out a very particular kind of career path. And I think people have a lot of opportunity to sort of make of it what they will after seeing all the different ways that it can be done in the studio.
Yeah, and I'm just a journalist. I have nary an artistic bone in my body, but I hear often from people who create comics, writers and illustrators and people who do both, that there is no one set way to get into the business. There is no one, like, you don't have to, the rung of the ladder that you're reaching for doesn't have to be the big two. And so I really love, and I've heard this before at Helioscope, that there is just a wealth of information within these human beings who all come together to create art in the way that they want to do it. And I think that that's really, it speaks to sort of the DIY nature of comics, which I think is why I'm so very interested in it, sort of that DIY punk spirit. But I guess my question for you is, you said you started making your own comics in 2010, shortly before you graduated college. What gave you the little nudge to do that? Because I think a lot of people stand at the precipice of that and look and feel a little scared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the teaching that I did in those first few years was really focused on like how to just get your butt in the chair and start making marks on the page, which I should point out is still something a decade into this career that I struggle with on a regular basis. Like, it doesn't ever go away. And that's an unfortunate and sometimes alarming truth, I think, to look at your idols. It used to be the thing that I said I loved about Twitter, that you could like log on and find an artist you really admired and their whole Twitter feed would just be them complaining about how they couldn't draw hands. And you're like, what are you talking about? You draw the best hands in the world. Like, how is this possible? Twitter has changed a little bit in the last 10 years, but at the time, I found it both distressing and reassuring, because it was like, oh, even the people that I idolize have a hard time doing this some days. And then some days you feel like you're, a walking manifestation of the divine creative spirit, and like lightning is shooting out of your fingers and everything is cool and great, but it's just not like that 100% of the time, which is fine. I think it was following the example of other artists who were going their own way and putting their work online. There was something hugely empowering about seeing a lot of the folks that I was following to go be at Helioscope, Dylan McConis and Erica Moen, people like Danielle Corsetto, who were in this vanguard of webcomics, people who were really just like stepping into the space and deciding to publish their own work without waiting for the approval of a traditional publishing structure. And the graphic novel boom was like not really a thing at the time. There were graphic novels, but it was like everyone who was doing classes on it in school, it was all still Mouse and Persepolis. And this, like, especially the boom of middle grade graphic novels hadn't really hit the market yet. And I think that's really where we're seeing just like such an enormous explosion of talent and creativity right now. So yeah, it was a combination of like seeing the roadmap from other people, but then also being able to go to events like the Portland Zine Symposium and the Stumptown Comics Festival, and to see just like the range, right? You don't go to those events and be like, oh, I guess I have to have a perfectly published professional looking book in order to fit in here. It's like, this person made a mini comic out of soda can tabs. Like, you can do whatever you like. And I think it also helped to be I didn't go to art school. I went to Reed College here in Portland, which is a very quirky liberal arts institution. And I did come away with a studio art degree, but it wasn't what I had intended to go there for. But I think being in a program that exposed me to a lot of the like artists book movement, was really helpful as well, because it really redefined the parameters of like what counts as something in this space. So yeah, it was those things. I also did the real catalyst. I haven't talked about this in a while. I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies, the comics graduate program in White River Junction, Vermont, and did a 5-day summer workshop there, summer of 2010. And actually, that was the real thing. Because it was 5 days of being surrounded by other people who wanted to draw comics, which was like the first time I'd met other people who wanted to do that and gotten to like work alongside them. The idea of a school entirely devoted to comics was just like alien and magical. And the faculty who were there, Alec Longstreth, John Chad, Robin Chapman, Beth Hetland, who was a student, I think, at the time, but was now teaches at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, I believe. All these folks who just were like powerhouse indie cartoonists, and brought so much passion and enthusiasm and craft to the table. Steve Bissett too was on faculty there at the time. Yeah, they just gave really wonderful talks and presentations, and that was where I drew my first mini comic in over many sleepless, not many, like 3 sleepless nights. I didn't really sleep very much the 5 days I was there, but I came away with my very first 8-page mini comic, and that over the next few years turned into the first chapter of Baggy Wrinkles, my first graphic novel, which is all about the time I've spent sailing on big, tall ships like that one up there.
Yeah, you're a real life pirate lady, which I really appreciate.
Does turn out to be true, yeah.
I don't think many people can say that. So, adventure cartoonist / pirate lady.
Yeah.
And but not only do you have, I think, what I would call an interesting path to comics, because I think everybody's path is pretty interesting to comics. You sent to me an article that I read through the Hollywood Reporter about a project that started as a 100-day ink sort of project, and you turned it into a book. And I thought it was so lovely and charming.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I found it immediately relatable, and I think a lot of people will if they haven't already.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Baggy Wrinkles was a more traditional like graphic novel thing. I did fund it through Kickstarter, which has been my kind of MO for my whole career, is doing comics through crowdfunding campaigns. But in 2015, I tried the 100-day project for the first time, which was, it is exactly what it sounds like. You do something creative every day for 100 days. It is very much up to interpretation. And the first year I did it, I decided to illustrate an important object from my life every day and write a little colophon about like where it came from and why it was important to me. And that project was, I think, I published it with leftover funds from a previous Kickstarter, and it was much more a like weird artist's book situation. It's called A Life in Objects. And that one is like, if people respond to it, they really respond to it, but it's a weird kind of thing. But around the same time, actually even as early as 2012, I think, I had been doing little like sketchbook doodles of a tiny impish demon character who embodied all of my inner criticisms of myself. And in the past, I think for like Inktober's or various like drawing challenges, I had done little one-off comics of like single panel gags with me and this character. And people liked them, but there was one that I posted in 2016 that I think was me writing a huge list of my accomplishments from that year. And the demon was perched behind me saying, you know, pointing off screen saying, oh my God, they're all so much better than you. And you're never going to stand a chance. And it's everybody else is doing more and doing it better. And I was saying something like, you know, they probably all have little assholes just like you, and we would probably be friends because everyone's got this voice. And that was the one that I think first elicited any kind of like mass response of a lot of people saying, oh, wow, I feel this too. And people all across the spectrum of professional level, you know, from like newcomers to established pros. And when I came around to wanting to do the 100-day project for a second time, I thought, yeah, you know, like I've experimented with playing with this dynamic for Inktober, but it's just 30 days and it's not, I felt like there was still more that I wanted to dig into thematically. And so I decided to do an entry every day for 100 days. And what I ended up coming up with was not intended to be a book. originally, but I was sharing them as I went. And that meant that as they started to gather steam and people started to get excited about them, I started fielding questions, especially on Instagram, from people saying, "Oh my God, is there going to be a book? Are you going to make a book? Please make a book. I would like a book." And in my experience, if your audience is clamoring for something like that, it's best to pay attention and give them what they want. So I would say that probably about a month in, I had started to really gain some traction with the project. And the lovely thing about the 100-Day Project is it's the same time every year. So people, you're part of a community of other people who are doing it. And I think the 100-Day Project hashtag on Instagram brought a lot of people to my door who might not have found me otherwise, which I'm traditionally not very hashtag savvy. But I would say that a lot of folks would go to the 100-Day Project on any given day and it would be in the top 9 or whatever. And so then they would come and then the numbers grew and the sort of a self-perpetuating prophecy or whatever the circumstances. So yeah, that led to many, I want to say like multiple thousands of people over the course of those 3.5 months started following the project. And I think by day 80, I had put together a Kickstarter campaign. I decided I was going to produce a book and I was also going to make plush toys because I wanted to do something goofy and indulgent. And basically it turned out to be that the 3.5 months were like an advertising campaign, so that on day 100, I posted the final entry and the Kickstarter at the same time, which was like one of the most terrifying, press send moments of my life. And the campaign funded, like, I don't know, 4 hours later. Like, it was a real whirlwind. And over the next 3 weeks, a bunch of people pitched in, and eventually we ended up with a bunch of beautiful books, which are very shiny. I love how shiny they are. It's my favorite thing about self-publishing is that you get to decide where and how much spot glass to deploy, and the answer is all of it, all over.
Yeah, and the 100 Demons dialogue, 100 Demons dialogues, is a project. Do you feel like, I know that this is kind of a weird question, but do you feel like it is a self-indulgent project or something that you're gifting other people, or both? Like, how does that work as somebody who creates art for a living, which is intrinsically for the eyes of other people?
Sure. These are big questions, and I chew on them all the time. I am a ruminant. I am constantly just nomming on the same stuff over and over again, and it's mostly to do with this question. I did the 100-Day Project this year, and I didn't share it with anyone. I didn't even tell people in my immediate life that I was doing it. And now I'm in the interesting position of having a body of work that's 100 things long that I'm like, I want to share this because I make art, as you say, for other people, but it is also, art has this, especially comics, I think, have this very particular dual nature of simultaneously being deeply self-indulgent and also designed to be seen and read by other people, at least as far as I see it. Like, comics to me are about communication. And it is a weird balancing act in one's own head to sit with the fact that often what I have found to be true through experience is the more truthfully I lean into the things that I find compelling, and the more honestly I examine my own emotional experience, the more resonant those things are with other people, which feels counterintuitive. The internet subtly and not so subtly guides us towards crafting something which is as anodyne as possible and appeals to as many people as possible. And I think that's a real challenge. The conclusion, not that this book is like strictly narrative, but I think had I not been sharing these comics in real time with an audience, it would not have had the narrative arc that it did. Because when I started, it did feel very self-indulgent. And over 3.5 months, the more entries I posted, every time I would post an entry that I'd be like, this one's too personal, this one's too dark, this one's too this one's too that. Those were the ones that people were like, this is me. I see this, I know this. Which doesn't make any sense to me still. But over time, you can't really argue with the truth of the evidence, right? Which is that people are responding to these things. And initially, I had intended to end the book. I had this faint idea of like, maybe I come home one day and I find that my demon has an even smaller demon that's busy telling it that it's not a very good demon, which is like, that's the ultimate navel gaze, is it's just like turtles all the way down. And what actually ended up happening is that the demon threw a temper tantrum at the end of the book. And I was like, okay, you need to come and see something. And I dragged him out to the front of my house. And there were a crowd of people who were all holding their own demons. And that crowd of people is actually literally drawn from folks on Twitter who I just put a call out and said, like, hey, can you send me a reference photo of yourself if you want to be in a thing? So quite literally, the people who were my readership, who were a part of this experience, became the conclusion of the book, which is really meant to be about looking outside the self, right, and connecting with other people. And after the book came out, I launched onto a truly insane self-organized book tour that took me away from home for the majority of 2018. I was on the road for 290 something days out of the year, and visited many, many, many places and met many people who were all lovely and wonderful. And one of the things, I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday, that the tour felt really important because this did feel like a conversation, and also a conversation that deserved to be had in person. The internet is great for a lot of things, but I think the ultimate power of art, and maybe this is like the theater kid in me, is that I'm like, I want people in a room together having an emotional experience based around a work of art. Like, that's what I want. And the book tour seemed like the best way to do that. And it wasn't really like, I'm going to come and sit here and sign books. It was more like, I'm going to sit here and talk a little bit about emotional resonance. And then like, maybe you're going to tell me some stuff. Because I don't want it to be a one-way street. I think that's really the struggle, is that I don't want to just be on the internet trumpeting stuff out into the ether and like receiving depersonalized likes and retweets in return. That's not a conversation. And I think a lot of my preoccupation over the last year especially has been how to change that dynamic to create something. And that's really what I'm chewing on right now with my current 100-day project, and how to disseminate it is like, how do you make a conversation happen? So ultimately, the thing that I came away with from the tour that I loved was this guest book. And at every tour stop, I asked people to fill out name tags that say, hi, my name is blank, and my demon tells me blank. And people were really very brave. And it was also really striking because you started to see commonalities. You know, a lot of people were saying like, nobody cares what you have to say. You're not pretty enough. You should read more. There were a lot of should demons. I don't belong. I'm pretending. I'm never going to make money from my comics. Man, Jonah, you will, my dude. You're going to do it. Anyway, and then some people drew their own as well, which I really adore. But this object is like, this is the thing that I see as the future of what I want to be doing, because it empowers people to step into that conversation, and maybe enables them to do the thing we talked about at the start of the call of like, to make that jump into just starting to put pen to paper. And I think that's the real beauty of the Demon Dialogues premise, is that even on the days when your demon is saying, if your demon is saying anything, you have something to draw. Like, you are never going to be sitting there saying, I don't have any ideas, because the demon of you don't have any good ideas is like the biggest and loudest thing in the room. And all you have to do is draw that. And so I think it's a great like perpetual motion machine. It's you're pinning down the thing that tries to tell you that you can't do it, and like using its own wiles against it to say, well, I made something, I made something out of this horrible voice in my head. And this is not an original idea, I should point out. Like, tons of other artists have done this to beautiful effect in all different kinds of media, but particularly in comics. I think it's very common that you'll see people trying to personify these parts of themselves. And Jessica Abel's done it, Yumi Sakagawa's done it, lots of people before I came along, and and Linda Barry, 100 Demons is the name of one of her comics collections. I think there's a really rich history of this that folks can tap into.
It makes a lot of sense, because you get a bunch of creatives in a room and you've never seen more imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
I, as a journalist, can super relate to the idea of stalling before putting pen to paper. Like, you spend so much time ramping up that you feel like, I don't know if I can, kind of crawl over this hurdle. But I want to circle back to the idea of creating like a real emotional response and exchange on the internet, which I think is such a lofty goal. And I think can be really difficult, especially because people just want to be mad sometimes. People just want to look at cute dog photos sometimes. People go to the internet for lots of different reasons, but it's not typically to have an emotional exchange. They want it to be one-sided, right? But you, excuse me, sorry, my dog is crying for no reason. Same. But you have flipped that idea on its head, not only with your book, but also you have a project going right now that you had mentioned that they tie in together, and I think they do from the standpoint of trying to elicit an important emotional response from people in a unique way. And I think it is especially pertinent now that we're all stuck inside of our homes, sort of fearing for each other's health, fearing for the world in many ways. And we all have these issues, we all have these things that are sort of just eating away, and we can't ignore. It's really hard to ignore your problems when you're sitting alone in your house, right?
So true. So true.
I was really, this is how I'm almost embarrassed to say, as I report on comics, I found you on Twitter because of this current project, The Right Number, before I understood that you were a very talented illustrator. And
that's great, though. I love that.
And I called the number. I left a message.
Oh my God.
And also was like, hey, I'm a reporter. But then I reached out to you via Twitter. And I'm talking around the point. The Right Number is something you set up for people to call anonymously or non-anonymously if they want. It has a prompt that changes every 2 weeks. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
I sure can.
Yeah.
So for the last couple of years, I've been doing something on Patreon, which is increasingly the place that I get my my steady paycheck from. It's the community that I've sort of invested the most in recently. And Patreon, a couple of years ago, I started to really burn out, especially after my book tour, on writing like peppy, text-heavy updates on what I was up to and everything I was doing. And I was feeling really overwhelmed. And so I switched to doing these, I call them rambles, because I really explicitly didn't want to make a podcast, because I think when you call something a podcast, you got to have the pop filter and the mic and the nice thing, and everything's got to look professional. And I'm a perfectionist. So like if I label something a professional project, I will feel compelled to make it professional. And this was like, I'm going to talk into my phone. I'm going to record a voice memo with my shitty headphones and tell you about everything that's going on right now, because I can talk faster than I could ever type. And I recorded this little 20-minute thing, just like lying on my back in a park, looking up at the sky. And I started doing that every 2 weeks instead of writing updates. And it has been just lovely. Like the quality of response that I get from people and the conversations that we are able to have, which really do feel conversant in a way that writing peppy blog posts just didn't really cut. There's all these intonations and inflections. You get to hear the ambient sound. If I take an early morning walk, you're listening to birdsong and footfalls. And there's a comedian, Adam Buxton, who runs a podcast, and he does this thing at the start of every episode called a ramble chat, which was deeply inspirational for this, where it's just him trudging through the fields in England with his recorder and his dog, and giving a little introduction to the interview that he's about to share on the podcast. And those are my favorite parts of every show, because you can just like hear the space that he's in. So in doing that, that again is like a very one-sided thing. We were having conversations in the comments, but I wanted people to be able to record audio stuff in return. And I experimented with making like Google Drive folders for each ramble where people could upload their own audio, but it was really clunky. And I was like, no. I want something slick. I want just like a number you dial, and there's a voicemail box. And when I was a youth, probably like preteen, I was really into this series of self-help books by an author named Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy, or Sark, who makes these like very multicolored, very 90s, like live your passion kind of books. And I say that with like kind of a smirk, but they were truly life-changing for me as a young person. And they do not shy away from talking about like living with your dark self and getting into the mushy emotional difficulties of being human. And in every Sark book, there was a number in the back called the inspiration line that you could call. and she would leave this like rambly voice message that was 5 to 10 minutes long, and you would listen to it. And then if you wanted, you could say something into the voicemail box, and that was it. You know, there was no like strong reciprocal conversational element, but it felt like a conversation. It felt like a connection, and it felt kind of secret and cool. I called it exactly once. And I was in England at my grandmother's house and nursing some sort of teenage heartbreak. And I think I was like 15 or 16. And I called and left a message. And a couple months ago, quarantine time, I was enduring some personal heartbreak and read one of her books just to be like, maybe I should go back to this. And there was the number in the back of the book. And I was like, this came out in like 1995. You know, there's no way that the number is still. And then I called the number. And the number is still operational. And there she was, like, you know, laughing and recording this message about loving the dark parts of yourself. And I was like, wow, this is potent. And I came of age when like Post Secret was a really big thing. I was part of a lot of like random postal exchange communities online, in the early 2000s. And I've just always loved that kind of community sourced art project. So the right number is exactly as you've described. It's a phone line that you call into. It's run very simply. It's set up just through like a Google Voice number. And so there are some limitations. I can only record a message that's a minute long. People can only record responses that are 3 minutes long. If it becomes more of a thing, I mean, it's only been running for 3 prompts, right? So six weeks now. But I've firmly found throughout doing the 100-day projects that I think projects we always want something to launch with a lot of fanfare, but the fact of the matter is that all the projects that have been the most successful in my career have taken a really long time to sort of find their feet and become something. And so I've been giving myself permission to not think about it too much. And I come up with questions and I put them up there. And, you know, I just finished making a website with my friend Robin Rendell, who like designed this beautiful landing page for it, which is therightnumber.tel, T-E-L. And you can go and read about the project there and call the number. But I've let it come together in bits and bobs. And now, so far, I can tell you from having 3 prompts out in the world, I launched it on my birthday, and it was in some ways a very selfish act. Having a birthday in quarantine sucked, and I was post breakup out of a major partnership, and I was feeling deeply lonely, and put the phone line out with the initial prompt, what is something you wish another person would say to you right now? And I spent most of my birthday sobbing, just a total mess of a person, because it was so meaningful to have all of these messages. You know, over 100 people called into the line that day, or over those 2 weeks, I guess, and shared just like the most vulnerable and human and perfect responses I could possibly ask for. And I think the real beauty of it is that I don't have to do anything aside from listen. As an indie creator on the internet, there is so much pressure to constantly be responding to every piece of input you receive, to answer every comment, to respond to every Instagram DM, to reply to every email, and to have something that's like, nope, this is just little 2-way radio that only works once. You can send something out, they can send something in, and then that's it. The radio shuts down. You can't do it anymore. And I'm taking a lot of like solace and peace in that. And it's been really cool to hear the things that people are sending in. And I have said that it would be nice to make something out of the stuff that people send, just because it's so rich. But right now it is strictly confidential. Whatever gets said in the box stays in the box. And in the future, if there is an installment where I might use audio that people send in, my thought is that I can say, you know, you can have a verbal consent opt-in where you're like, yes, you can use this. And then maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's something else. But for right now, that's what it is. And we just get to sit here and enjoy it.
I think that, first of all, that was a beautiful explanation. Second of all,
thank you. This is my first interview about it, so thank you for giving me a bit of a run at trying to talk about it with other people.
I'm glad you're feeling better. Happy belated birthday. And I think so. I'm going to talk about myself for a second.
Do it, please. This is my least favorite thing about interviews. Tell me about you.
Which is an interview no, but I'm going to do it.
Do it.
What I love about being a journalist is that I am essentially a megaphone for other people's stories that wouldn't be told to that degree, right? So my job is to be a messenger, and that's basically it. But what a privilege it is to be so intimate with so many people. People come to me and journalists when they need help, when they need their story shared and they don't have the tools to do it. And to me, I find that so important, and it's such a privilege in my life to be able to know people so intimately, so quickly, so often. And it's just shifts and then it's over, right? And I think that there's something so magical and intangible about being a secret keeper, right? To a certain extent, because of course, when I talk to people, you don't put everything, like the conversations that you have, into a story. Every time you make a connection, you come away with somebody else's secret, and to some degree about something. Could be that they had crumbs on their face the whole time you were interviewing them. I would tell somebody, but you know what I mean? It could be something as minute and small as that, or it could be something very deep that they, felt the need to share with you. And I think this sort of two-way radio situation that you have creates this very uniquely intimate situation. And my question for you is, how does it feel to be a secret keeper like that?
I have been trying to practice keeping more secrets in my life. And I think a lot of cartoonists and a lot of indie creators who are working on the internet are running into this realization that it is unsustainable to broadcast every second of your life to an online audience. Even if that is what nets you the likes and the follows, it is not what nets you spiritual fulfillment. It's not what nets you peace. And I've kept my own secrets in some capacities. I took up running 3 or 4 years ago. And again, didn't tell anyone in my immediate life, even the people I lived with. I would sneak out of the house at 5 a.m. to go run because I was dealing with my own baggage and shame around needing to do this stuff in secret so that I could fail on my own and then share it with people once I felt confident. And I've thought about it doing my current 100-day project, where part of me is this is selfish. You made something and you're just keeping it to yourself. And the odd follower has DM'd to be I'm really curious about this project, but I don't want to push it. So whatever you choose to do with it, that's great and fine. With other people, I really resonate with what you're saying about this, the opportunity to connect with people when they need something. A theme that came out of my last 100-day project was realizing that I had essentially done 100 things, which either were reminders or permission. And I think a lot about how art gives people reminders or permission. And I think their permission can also be read as validation. I think the conversations that you're having with interviewees are often, you are amplifying, but you're also legitimizing, and you are adding a tagline or a byline to somebody's story in a way that can elevate it to something that becomes journalism, which I think is a form of art. I mean, you can say, oh, I'm just a journalist. I don't think you're just a journalist. I think there is craft in all of the things that we do, especially as they pertain to bringing other people up with us or out with us, right? And I do think that it's a challenge. It's certainly for me as a storyteller, I receive these messages and I'm just so excited to share the ones that really resonate with me. And that's been an interesting question, is it's strictly confidential. Does that mean I don't share anything that would have a detail that might be recognizable? Or is it I don't say anything about the messages that I hear at all? I don't know. I don't have a clear answer for that yet, but it feels really rich, and also really counterintuitive for how I have learned to live my life. The internet has trained me to share a lot. I have benefited from sharing a lot, not just online, but in talks that I've given, in presentations that I've done. I have made a career off of being, I think, a little more vulnerable than the average bear. And it's a tricky line, because when you're rewarded for that, there is this expectation of just flay yourself open and let everybody see your mushy parts. And that's how you make a living, which, if you want to have boundaries, sets you up for a position of saying oh God, I can't not share everything because then my career will fail. And I think that's where something like Patreon is really beautiful, because the people who support me there are choosing to support me irrespective of what I produce. And without them, I wouldn't be doing weird experimental phone lines during quarantine. I would be hustling desperately on the street to try to draw commissions of people's dead pets. Like that's, and no shame in that. I've done a lot of it, but over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been on Patreon, I think it is 6 years now, that community has grown to a degree that has really granted me a lot of freedoms to be able to pursue more conceptual work. I've started to gravitate towards more creators who are doing stuff that's just a little bit like outside the usual norm. I'm thinking of people like Xingyan Core, who is currently running a pen pal live action role-playing game called Space Gnome Space, where 100 people signed up to pretend to be gnomes in space and write each other postcards. That's it. It's like limited, it's small, it's offline, it's weird, it's fun. Xing is such a source of inspiration for me in so many ways. And their work is just unbelievable. And then there are other things like there's a weird legacy platform online called Meet Space, which is a chat room where your camera records like a 2-second GIF of you while you are typing your message to the channel and then sends both of them concurrently. So every chat comes attached with a little snippet of somebody's face. And again, that's a space that's online and it uses the internet for connection, but it gives you this extra twist of humanity that's like unexpected and fun. And so I think for me, the next step of whatever it is that I'm trying to do is taking this community that I've cultivated who are willing to go with me into the weird places, which bless them, and using that to foster more of those spaces that surprise and delight and connect. And I guess that's what comes next.
And I think that's so lovely. I hate to keep referring to the times, but the time.
I know, but I'm eyeballing it, and it's time.
I have one last question for you. It's a short one, hopefully. What is your demon saying to you today?
Today is a rough day, to be brutally honest. My dog woke me up in the middle of a REM cycle this morning, which is just like I woke up bad. Sometimes you just wake up bad. And I got up and I walked the dog and I saw the moon and it was beautiful. And even with all of that, I came back and just all morning I have been an absolute vegetable. I gave up and crawled back into bed. It was one of those days. And I think currently, I suppose the weight of today, the weight of this morning, because I knew I had these like back-to-back talky, fun, turn on your extrovert charm stuff going on this afternoon, that I was like, well, I have to rest, I have to conserve my energy. But it was absolutely a morning of my demon saying, what's the point? What is the point of any of this? We are just all up against such heavy stuff right now on so many axes. And I think a lot of my online presence, I try to stay very positive on the internet. I try to be somebody who is encouraging and hopeful. And there are days like today where it is just not possible to muster that in and of myself. And I'm really so grateful that we had this call because I think the thing that I've found is it's not up to us to have to generate that internally all the time. That's not how humans are built. We are built to talk to each other. And the times when I have been humbled enough by anxiety or depression or fear to reach out to the internet and say, hey, you remember how I've shared stuff in the past that's maybe made you feel a little less alone? Like, I'm not doing so hot right now. And it is so humbling because in those moments, people reflect back to me the things that I think I have sent out to them in the past. And it turns out that we really do make the medicine that we want to receive. And in those moments, I've felt incredibly seen and incredibly held by community. And so I think this is a really good reminder. And I'm so grateful for the parts of yourself that you chose to share in this call because it is a reminder that there are other people out there doing the work of trying to make connection with people and trying to elevate other people and trying to keep going, which is no mean feat in the midst of all of this. So my demon is a little quieter for having had this conversation, and I'm very grateful to you for it.
Oh, I really appreciate that. It's very kind. You speak of community, and I'm going to address the channel. You have a great community where you're striving to make emotional connection and also share incredible art. Your Patreon, your social media, I will make sure that's all on the screen so that way anybody who's interested can join and see what you're up to and leave a message if they want. And it's crazy times. We could all use each other. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me as well. And I just think what you're doing is so cool and so worth mentioning. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Destiny. This has been really lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much to Lucy for taking the time to talk with me. I hope you really enjoyed that. I think she has so much good advice and she just comes across so genuine and lovely, and so I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to see what she's coming up with next. And yeah, I loved talking about being professional secret keepers because I think that that is a real thing. I enjoy it as a part of my job, and I think that everybody can be a professional secret keeper if they want, you know? So I'm really excited to see where the right number goes. I'm excited to see her 100-day project that is quietly under wraps and all sorts of stuff. So I hope you truly enjoyed that. I did too. I've been a little bit out of the nerd world, so please let me know in the comments below what you've been reading, what you've been loving, what news you've been seeing that I may have missed. But I'm so glad to be back. And next week I have an awesome interview with another comic creator named Sierra Miller, who just had her comic come out. It's for kiddos, but as we know, comics for kiddos are not always just for kiddos. It's called Mason Mooney, and it is so cute. And she's just so genuine and so nice. And so I'm really excited for you guys to see that too. Her interview made me just want to run out and buy her book, and I hope it inspires you to as well, because it looks really cool. Somewhere between creepy and cute, which is just like right up my street. So thank you so much. Sorry for the absence. Thank you for your patience, but you know where to find me. If I'm not here, I'm on Twitter spitting lukewarm takes that nobody asked for and reposting pictures of the red pandas from the Oregon Zoo because it's the only thing that gives me serotonin besides my dog. I also post pictures of my dog, so maybe you should follow for that reason. We've gotten off on a tangent here. It's been a while since I've been in front of the camera. I'm feeling a little stressed. Anyway, thank you for your patience. As always, I will be back with more nerd content. Hopefully I will have my fingers on some new comics, which I'm really excited about. I just placed an order with Floating World Comics, as I always do. It's been a while since I've been there, but you know they're my number one. Alright, thank you so much. I will see you guys next week, same-ish time, same place, and until then, this has been Nerd News with Destiny. Oh yeah, also look out for the Nerd News in 60 Seconds this week because we're going to talk about all the new Disney Plus stuff, which is very exciting. Okay, bye!